When I came into office, the United States, in world opinion, ranked below China and just barely above Russia. And today, once again, the United States is the most respected country on earth. And part of that, I think, is because of the work that we did to re-engage the world.
President Obama claiming his administration restored our nation to unparalleled respectability in the world. Meantime, in the Middle East, conditions continue to deteriorate as ISIS consumes and occupies major parts of that region. And according to our next guest, Islamic extremists have infiltrated America and wield influence at the highest levels of government. Joining us now, Senior Fellow for the Center for Security Policy, Stephen Coughlin. Stephen is the author of Catastrophic Failure, Blindfolding America in the Face of Jihad. And Steve joins us tonight from Newsmax, New York. Steve, you claim Islamic extremists wield influence in our government. How is that possible, and how is that happening?
Well, thank you for having me on your show, JD. Yes, if you go back to a case that was tried in 2008 called the Hoyland Foundation case, what was entered into evidence was a Muslim Brotherhood document written in 1991 called the Explanatory Memorandum, where it said, we are the Muslim Brotherhood. We're in America to penetrate into the U.S. through subversion and also to get our people to do their work for them. The term they used was civilization jihad by our hands. And then they provided a list of their members at the back of the document. Now, this document was admitted into evidence, and it stood appeal a couple times, and it named all the Muslim Brotherhood players that exist to this day. Some have gone into changed their names with the times, or had to shut down one operation and started up another with the same leadership. But we know who they are because they identified themselves in that document.
And of those people identified, are there people actively working in our government, in this administration, that you're prepared to name?
Well, it's not so much that they're the people in the government, it's that there are people who just show up at various functions. And I will give you an example. In 2010, when DHS was formulating its combating violent extremism protocols for doing violent extremism, Judicial Watch got a Freedom of Information Act documents that showed that ISNA leaders, CARE leaders, were allowed to come in and heavily influence the protection of the Justice Department's combating violent extremism policies that they were developing. So it's being around and showing up for the policy setting things that's the main influence.
So they were brought in essentially as kind of grassroots, and I use that in quotes, consultants to help different agencies formulate policy?
Yes, and in fact, what happened is you can see groups like CARE and MPAC, Council on American Islamic Relations, Muslim Public Affairs Council, and ISNA, Islamic Society North America. They basically said that their strategy was to become the consultants and trainers in our federal government. Back in 2011, there was a push to push out anybody who was training the enemy in the war on terror based on their doctrine, and then to have them replace them. And I would be one of those people. You know, I would have to say I was brought into the Pentagon after 9/11 as an intelligence officer to identify the threat. This threat, the enemy we fight, says categorically that they fight jihad according to Islamic law, to impose Islamic law. And they asked me to take that out of my training material, to purge it from my training material. I refused, so they purged me.
So, Steve, yes, they ask you to engage in kind of Orwellian newspeak, eradicate the accurate descriptions, and when you refuse to do so, they said take a hike. That's very disturbing. Less than a minute 30 remains, Steve. I want to switch gears now specifically to Iran. Only 28 days remain before the deadline for that nuclear deal. According to reports, Tehran's stockpile of nuclear fuel increased by 20% over the last 18 months of negotiations. In your opinion, is Iran racing toward a nuclear weapon before this deadline? And bottom line, with a minute remaining, Steve, does this indicate Iran has really no interest in a deal?
I think one of the most disturbing things about these negotiations is how often the Iranians just poke fun and deride our negotiators and come out in the news and even say our negotiators are lying about what's going on. I think they have no intention of following any agreements they have. They're using these negotiations, in my opinion, to run down America and to make them look like fools. What scares me about the negotiations, among other things, is the sense that our going into them seems so heavily oriented toward an ideological preconception that keeps us from actually being reality based on what's going on.
And we will have to
almost
leave it
bizarre.
right there. Steve Coughlin, we thank you for your time. We apologize for the extraneous noise from New York. We're coming right back.